Okay, looks like we're live again. Or hopefully we're live now. Should be. Looks like we are. And this time we are doing a live stream on the purchase to pay process. So this is everything from generating a purchase order all the way through to getting the vendor paid. So that's going to include material receipts and so on and so forth. I'm not going to cover RFQ in this because there's a few extra steps to set the system up to be able to do RFQs. So maybe we could do that in a different live stream. If you're interested, put that down in the comments or put it in chat if you're here live. Otherwise, what we're going to cover is just sort of going through the process manually. This isn't going to cover PO requirements generation or PORG. Because again, I haven't really taken the time to set up for that. This is just a very simple, this is how you manually get through it. So to launch the purchase orders, that's going to go through, through the purchase order entry screen. And a lot of the transaction windows in P21 are very similar to each other. So it kind of makes it fairly easy to get around in the system, right? So we are going to be at location 10. The user ID that I'm logged in at does not have a default location set, but in the user's profile, typically you're going to set a default location and that will pre-populate this for you. So the user doesn't have to do it every time. Okay, so we have this. Actually, you know what? I have to change this because we changed up the vendors. So let me just start over. Yes. I'd totally forgotten about that. So I don't even remember the vendor number. Black & Decker. There we go. And then you'll need to put in a buyer ID. Again, that is something that can be specified in user maintenance on the user's profile, and it will pre-populate here. Okay. So at this point, it's just like entering a sales order or any other header detail transaction. You're going to get the item ID in and how many you want to buy and what price you want to pay for them. A lot of these things can be dealt with in your supplier pricing setup. So a lot of this will pre-populate. Again, I have not set all that up in this test system. That's for another day. But there we go. So I've got my item bought. This is what I want. And again, just like any other transaction, you can go in here and print that transaction or email it if the system is set up for email. You get a purchase order, send it to the vendor or the supplier. There is a difference between suppliers and vendors in Profit 21. I think the best way that I can describe it is the supplier is who's going to send it to you. The vendor is who you're going to pay. And a lot of times, like most times, that's probably the same entity. But in a lot of these larger corporations like 3M rings a bell or others where you might buy from 5 or 6 different subsidiary companies, but the payments all roll up to the same master company. That's a case where you might have one vendor ID with multiple supplier IDs. But for the most part, for simpler suppliers, you're going to have a one-to-one relationship between vendor and supplier. Okay, so we've issued our PO. The vendor has shipped the goods. They are now on the dock. So we're going to go to purchase order receipts. There is an equivalent for this on the wireless warehouse gun or wireless warehouse device, I should say. Let's see. I don't even remember the PO number. Okay, there we go. And I can just put in how many I'm going to receive. Now this is a lot controlled item and it's lot bin integrated at the warehouse. So I have to go to my lot bin tab. I have this set up to automatically assign lot numbers, and then I can choose where I want to receive it to. So by default, the location is set up to receive everything to a receiving bin called rec. But, in this case, we might say, hey, we're going to receive this directly into bin A1. And our quantity, let's just get the whole 200 was in the same lot. Here you're deciding what happens with any back orders. Most of the time you're going to leave it to allocate automatically. But there are some instances where you might want to manually allocate. Typically, we find receiving staff does not do manual allocation. There are always cases where that may be true, but normally you're just going to leave it as allocate automatically. We've also had a few instances, especially during all the supply chain issues, where we were defaulting this for customers to receive only so that they weren't like getting all of their inventory wiped out the second that it came in, and they were just trying to manually manage it. Again, it's a case-by-case thing for your business. But by and large, it's going to be allocated automatically. All right, once you have that done, as long as this approved checkbox is checked, once you receive this, it's received. Now, you can come back and receive against this PO a second time if you didn't get all the parts. It will just be on a separate receipt of goods. So it's not a problem to do multiple receipts. Just realize you're not going to come back into an approved receipt and then add to it. A receipt is a receipt. It's a one and done, and it's over with. So we'll go ahead and approve this. No, I don't want to adjust. So what that message box is saying is, hey, you're receiving this in, but it doesn't cover all the back orders. By default, we're going to do oldest required date first. Is that okay, or do you want to manually adjust it? And I said, no, I don't want to manually adjust. Just allocate however you want to allocate. All right, so that's finished. And this, keeps happening right throughout the day, throughout the week, whatever. And then at some point, you're going to want to pay the vendor or vouch it in P21. And so the way that you're going to do that is, the easiest way to do it is convert PO to voucher. And so presumably at this point, you have an invoice in your hand from the vendor. Now, in this case, there's only one PO. And so when you put it in, it gets defaulted in. If we had multiple POs, a screen would come down and overlay, and you would be able to choose which POs you want to vouch, or which receipts really that you want to vouch. So in this case, there's only one, so this is all we're going to do. And so the quantity to invoice is 200 because that's what we received. And so you can say, okay, well, that is the actual quantity I'm invoicing. It's going to require you to put in an invoice number. And then it's also going to require you to put in an amount. So I think this is $226. But what we might say is, hey, it's actually, let's say it's $230. And they charged us $4 for freight. Everything always has to balance out, right? So there's your $230, there's your freight. So everything totals out, right? So the $4 of freight was allocated out to the lines. There's only one line, so it all went to that one line. And that's it. Now it's vouched. So that sets up the vendor invoice in P21. And there's your voucher. And so I think you can do, pretty sure you can do a drill down on that if you want to look at it. Yeah, there you go. So you can start to look at it, and then you can even drill in a little bit farther and do an inquiry on the voucher. So you can see there's our freight variance, and it got posted to whatever we said was the freight account. And then here's our inventory that goes to the inventory clearing account. All right. So now you just need to pay the vendor, right? And again, you may do several of these vouchers, and then you may be vouching every day, and then at the end of the week you're paying. I mean, you're going to receive a vendor invoice, you're going to vouch that invoice, and then at some point you're going to cut them a check. The normal way to do that would be through what's called the scheduled check screen. A lot of people shorten that to the check run, but the actual name of it is scheduled checks, system generated check printing. And we're going to say, okay, we're paying out of bank number 1. And in this case, we'll just leave it wide open and pay everybody. Now, these are important here because they're going to default to today on these dates, but they're also going to determine which invoices are in scope. So if these invoices are not due for a month because your terms are a month out, or you set your due date to a month out, I may not get anything here. So if I go in here and say I want everything, or just invoices marked for payment or whatever, I'm not getting anything here because these invoices are farther out in the future. So what we want to do is we want to move the next payment date out to see if we can capture some invoices. So see, once I move that next payment date out and say, hey, I want to go ahead and pay everything that's due between now and, or at least I want to look at everything. Let's say it that way. I want to look at everything that's due between now and the end of February. Then you start to see some things. And here's the one that we just did. And so you can choose to pay that or not pay it. And you can pay some of them or all of them or whatever you want to do. So we'll pay all. And at this point, you would have a check printer set up if you're mailing checks. If it's an ACH batch, then it'll run through ACH. Or if you have some custom positive pay thing set up or whatever, that you can do it that way too. It just kind of depends on how you interact with your bank. But let's just keep it simple and say, no, we're going to print this to the check printer. So at this point, I'm going to print it. And it's going to go hit the check printer. And it's going to ask you, okay, do you want to reprint checks? It's going to give you the checks and give you an opportunity to say, oh, something got messed up, I need to reprint them. But if you don't, this is fine. You can see it shows exactly how it was paid. And we can go back over here to schedule checks. No, I don't want to reprint checks. And that's it. It's paid. Let's see if we go to... I was thinking you could look up... I think it's really just AP drill down is really where you want to look this stuff up. So if I go back in here, yeah, see, it's showing that net due date was 2/24, which is why we had to push it out. Let's see here. So if we clear this, oops, 1,012. Now it's saying that no vouchers exist. Well, yeah, because they're paid. But if we said show all, it will go back out there and retrieve them and say, okay, you paid this on 125. And you can even drill into the amount paid. And it's going to tell you, yeah, it was check 1236, paid this on 125. We paid it in full, $230. There was nothing deducted off of it or anything like that. And you can even go back to the purchase order on that and say, hey, this was this purchase order number, this receipt number, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of detail there. Every time you see that little icon come up, you can just drill in farther. So here's the actual receipt information. Oh, okay, we received 200. This was the unit price, so on and so forth. So that's really about it for purchase to pay. Again, you can generate purchase orders from order entry, specials and directs. You can initiate them from PO requirements generation from your purchasing department. That's kind of beyond the scope of just doing the basic process walkthrough, but we can certainly come back and dive in deeper on that if we need to. Just put it in the comments if that's what you want to see. But other than that, those are the basic processes from end to end to get from PO all the way through to cutting a check to the vendor. So that's about it for this one. We appreciate you guys, and join us again on another live stream.